sorry. Previous to this, it looks pretty basic. It is over 3 chapters. Or no, it's only 2 chapters. So I think everybody's good to go. It's on race and social stratification. I put some of those pieces up there. The discussion is done for momentarily, right? Everybody turned in their chapter 7 and 9. I feel like outside of this Zoom class, the world is like, and I feel like inside the Zoom class, we're like, oh yeah, we got that. Yeah. So I asked a question today. I released a question just because, I'm finishing up this chapter and we're not really going into the next stuff till after break. But any thoughts? I think it's important that we're on the 17th, and it's obvious that there's a presidential winner, and yet we are looking at some pretty unprecedented territory. Again, I don't want to, I don't want to be political from a side, choosing a side, but here we are, days and days later, and 2 weeks later, and I'm 47. I've never experienced this before. I put what election concerns do you have, but I think they're 1 for 24 in court, this administration, and there's not really a lot of ground to stand on. We're looking at COVID explode. I don't want to use a violent metaphor, but it's pretty much ravaging, places. I think South Dakota has the worst mortality rate, is that in the world, or something ridiculous like that? Yeah. And it seems as if the president's just sort of stopped presidenting. He's definitely tweeting all day long, which seems dangerous to me, and I'm trying to be nonpartisan, but yeah, I don't know. So hold on, I guess, and I think everything will work itself out, but whatever that you can do to keep yourself well informed and safe. And right now, we talked, look, obviously it's a bummer for everybody to not be in the classroom. Probably for most people, it's like a drag. For me, it's the biggest drag. It's a huge drag, because I would love, that's where I do my thing. That's where we do our thing. I would love to be doing that. That being said, right now is a time for everybody to be safe. And I know I have asked for empathy and masking up, and I know that really I'm preaching to the choir here, because there's people paying hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars collectively to get degrees. And so I know you believe in science. So continue to do your part, for everybody, because this is it's getting intense. That's for sure out there. I watched a couple of videos, and I don't normally, on some healthcare workers, because I'm teaching health and sociology, epidemiology of health and health inequalities. And I watched some frontline workers. Have you ever watched any of these videos? Ever in the last few days, or ever? I mean, nurses talking about people on their deathbed that are like, this is not real. And they're like, but it is real. And they're like, it's not. And they're like, I want you to FaceTime your family. I want you to do something important right now. And she says these people are like dying in anger and rage and disbelief. And I don't think that has to happen. And I think that's a direct result of the White House for months and months and months saying it's going to go away, and then it's a result of it saying it's not real, and then and so now here we are. Jason's walking the line of being political in class, but this matters. This really, really matters. I am worried and concerned for the lives of my students and people that I know, my dad, people I don't know, healthcare workers. And if I thought even the most diehard Trump fan, even the most diehard white supremacist, and you know how I feel about that because I let it be known. If those people are on their deathbeds, sad and angry, and won't reach out to people and think that this is a hoax, that is a major disservice that this administration has done. And it's so fucking tragic. I'm sorry. This morning, this is definitely, this is not political as much as it is about human decency and protecting each other. So, I have empathy for everybody. I mean, even the people that I find it hardest to find common threads with, those are scared human beings that are dying too. And they need love. So let's put our collective love out there, and you put your collective's safety net, anything that you can do. And the election stuff will be sorted out. I'm surprised somebody, because he's just waiting for transition funds and a little bit of information. Where's Bill Gates or somebody that has a lot of money? That's just, he's waiting for $9.9 million. That's nothing. $9.9 million. Somebody give this guy, this new administration, $20 million so that they can get on the ground running, because right now I think you've got an MIA person in the White House. And I was reading something the other day about how some historians think this guy's going to resign because A, it's better than looking like you got fired, and B, he can have Pence pardon him for federal crimes, which he cannot do unless he resigns. So there's a lot of ins and outs with this, but stay grounded and forget about all the swirling stuff and just do what you can to make things better, right? And we'll break all this stuff down, but I'm sure that'll be, next semester. But keep each other safe, because there is a level of concern and craziness. And we played Friday at the Aggie, and I don't know. It was safe. People were distant. But I looked out and people are drinking, and so they got their masks off. And you want me, the singer of the band, to take my mask off for 3 hours in a room full of people that I don't know who they are? Like, or if they're following protocols. I think it's a dangerous idea. I don't know that the band is going to play inside again. And we were safe and we felt safe and it was a great evening. But sometimes you got to shelf the things that that you want to do for the greater good. And there is, I still believe, a greater good. So, all right. Anyway, be good and be safe out there. I definitely want all of my students to be safe. I think most people are going home, right? And could be staying there. But I mean, once they're telling you get together, I mean, I saw a picture of like the first Thanksgiving kind of thing. But when people are eating outdoors, having Thanksgiving, if that's possible, that's great. Like if that's at all possible, do that. Eat outside. For me, we have one rule. Did I tell you our rule on Thanksgiving? I think I did, right? No? Oh, well, we have a rule, and it really keeps us safe from COVID or any other disease. Most of my family is 1,000 miles away. So our rule, enacted by my 12-year-old 5 years ago, is yes, when he was 7, no pants. That's right. Thanksgiving is a no pants holiday. And he's very specific about that. When Julie went to invite a friend over a few years ago, he was livid. There was a lot of protest, and he was very disappointed that he had to put pants on for even an hour while this person was over. I'm like, that's the spirit of Thanksgiving, bro. But now that COVID's around, he's like, ha. He's like, you cannot get around no pants. It is no pants for all of us all day. Turkey and no pants. So anyway, I hope you're being safe and that you follow your family rules, whatever those rules may be. I'm going to put pants on that day, but I understand why a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old don't want to. They just want to sit around all day in their underwear. I support that. All right. No questions. Moving on. I'm going to look at this, and we'll look at a little bit of ways we didn't really talk about deprogramming racism or sort of dismantling racism. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But let's talk about this first, because it's kind of the first thing. I'm not going to screen share it, because then I would just screen share it for a second and then I would stop and back out again. But the question was, do you have unearned privileges that make your life easier? 23 people said yes. If you multiply that by 4, you've almost got 196 or whatever. Or you do have, no. Yeah, I'm so bad at math. 92. And then the other would be 16. So overwhelmingly, people listed in here that they have unearned privileges that make their life easier, or unearned privileges that make your life harder. We did a brief discussion yesterday. I know it's early in the morning. We'll make it brief, but we came up with some things yesterday in my class that I just didn't even think about. Like I really wasn't thinking about. So it might not just be the overriding thing. Oh, well, I'm a peachish colored male with freckles of European descent, therefore, blah, blah, blah. It could be something much more subtle. And we did get to some really interesting subtle things. So what are some unearned privileges that you have? And again, this is about responsibility, not guilt. I love it that all my classes focus on that, because they're not going to get anywhere if everybody's just, not being real with it. So anybody, what unearned privileges do you have that make your life easier? Or I guess you could answer unearned privileges that make your life harder. Either one. And of course, so a lot of these are ascribed types of things. And I know it's early, so. My son is a horror fan. Anything Friday the 13th, anything Michael Myers, you name it. All right, what do you think?
I think some of the privileges that I was born with. That's what your question is, correct? Like what
Yeah,
privileges?
like, do you have unearned privileges that make your life easier, and what might one of those be, or a couple of those be? And that doesn't
I
mean it's like gravy train.
I think some of them, and I mean you can see it in statistics, is that um, being being white, we have the opportunity for a greater like response time in emergency personnel. You can definitely see that if I were to call the police would show up a lot quicker than if African American were to. And I think that's a privilege that I was given without even trying for it.
Absolutely. And when we're in this discussion and I say something like "good, good," I mean like good that you identified it, not like, oh, great, you got that extra privilege. But I think that if we're going to break down, analyze, and look at privilege and maybe how it could be positive for us, how it could be detrimental for us in sociological terms, got to be able to identify that. And I think that that's a big part of it, is like recognizing your own privilege. Okay, good. Response time. We did not get that yesterday. That's very interesting. Response time from authorities. Yeah. And I would say, particularly if you are calling in feeling threatened by a member of minority culture, that seems to be elicit an even quicker response time and or a heavier hand. I felt like raise your hand, or yes, just shake your head. I know there's just a handful of us here. Did anybody see the bird watcher, the African American guy who was bird watching in the person of dominant culture? She was walking her dog and called the police. Well, it's interesting because if you've never seen that video, her voice, she is like screaming at somebody like angrily, and then she calls the police, and it sounds like she's going to die. Like she knows what she's doing. And I would say this, to me, watching that video was the equivalent of calling in a hit job. White people in dominant culture know that if they call the police with a certain tone and a certain urgency, that when they show up, one of the likely things that could happen is they immediately eliminate and or get violent with that person of color before they've asked any questions. So I think you really brought up a good point, which is Landon, which is yeah, when emergency services show up, why are they there? How do they behave? What are their expectations? And of course, those are human beings too. In the last 25 years, and I probably told the class this, but I did diversity consulting in Minneapolis through Augsburg College, and we would go into corporations, we'd go into school districts, we would go into police departments, and the police department was much more than the school district or the corporations. The police department was the most pushback. They had the most sort of resistance to what we were doing. And that was also, once I did it long enough, it was really coincided with how long people had been on the force, like how long people had been there. Meaning that folks that were new, medium receptive, folks that have been there a little while, a little more receptive, and then people on the end that have been there quite a while, much like split between don't want to listen to you or we've got to do our jobs better. So even how long you've been policing makes a difference. All right, good. What else? What other unearned advantages? That's a good one, a subtle one. What or one that we might not think of very often. What's another unearned privilege you might have or disadvantage? Morning, Storm.
Um, well, I was like watching this show, and I swear it's relevant. And they were like, oh, if only it was a young white girl who was murdered, because that would get more attention from the reporters. And that's actually really common. Like, if a white girl goes missing, like the nation kind of comes together and tries to find out, and like all resources are used. But I've heard that if it's a person of color or a boy, sometimes not as much effort is made.
All right, so yeah, maybe the urgency with which we even look for somebody who might be abducted or something like that, using potentially greater resources or a quicker response time. And I'm not sure about those things. The gender piece in there is also very interesting. Do we respond faster based on gender. Those are very interesting things. And I think like we could find some systemic bias and other things we could there too. Who else? What else? I'm going to bring one up because I thought this was really interesting. And then go ahead. Somebody said yesterday, I have to carry pepper spray wherever I walk on campus. And so as a person who identified with the gender female, she was like, this is an unearned disadvantage. And all of a sudden it clicked, right? It clicked in my head, right? So I flew out to Chicago last week, which I guess by timely standards was better than flying out to Chicago this week, I guess. But Julie's like, would you like so she was having some people come into the store a while ago without masks. She works at Vitamin Cottage, Natural Grocers. They like to try and get up on these people who are grocery store workers and prove their point and endanger them. So she felt like she needed something to walk to her car with. So I bought her some military grade. I went to Jack's and I said, what do you have that's non-lethal that will almost kill someone? And they said, well, we got this military grade pepper spray. So I was like, give it. So I bought the good one, or the one that I thought was most effective. And she's had it for a couple months. And she said, well, you're going to Chicago. I know you're flying in. You don't know when your bus is going to be there. You're going to be walking around. You're going to Freeport. And my town it's not like crime filled like Rockford, but it's, anyway, I never thought about it. And she's like, would you like to use it? And immediately she said it. And I was like, nah, yeah, right. And I didn't think about it until yesterday when somebody was like, just on campus, things for my gender are so dicey that I have to arm myself. And I was like, wow, that is a massive unearned privilege that I have, that I don't have to think about that. Maybe it's because I have a beard. Maybe it's because I'm dumb and I should carry pepper spray. I don't know. But once I sort of like poo-pooed it right away and then didn't even think about it, and then we were having class yesterday, I was like, wow, what a huge privilege to be able to look at my wife and say, nah, just you have it. I mean, I did buy it for her, but there's privilege going on there, to be sure, right? I mean, I've sketched out once in a while walking around at nighttime, but that's not because I actually am in a demographic that would really have to worry about that so much. All right, what else? Unearned privileges. I think that's another subtle example that maybe we don't think about all the time. What do you think?
Well, on the flip side of what you just said, I thought that was interesting because I was thinking, what if it was a person of color carrying pepper spray? Would that necessarily be safe for them, or would that actually be more dangerous? Because then they're an armed person of color and that makes them a target. So I thought that was an interesting level of that too. And then something else I was going to say was that as a cisgender person, I've never had anyone use the wrong pronouns or had anyone tell me which bathroom I should use.
Right on. Good, excellent. See, there's so many, if as a culture you're taught that you don't have privilege and it's just all innate and we all deserve it or we don't deserve it, right? And it's like basically designed by nature and God's law or whatever fanciful things people want to talk about in the history of race relations. Obviously, wow, so many things that are so subtle that we don't think about. And not just in regards to race. Good. Okay. Well, what else? What else might be an unearned privilege that you have or something that makes your life a bit easier?
Kind of going off of the like pepper spray one, I would say like being drugged and stuff like that, especially as like a college student, because I feel like ever since I've been here, I've literally only heard like cover your drink, bring your own drink, like all that type of stuff, which is like, I don't know, it's just not a super like fun thing to hear in college, because I obviously like know it happens, but it's just kind of like, I don't know, instead of like telling girls to like, I don't know, not do this, maybe educate men more on like not doing this. But I mean, it happens either way. But that was kind of one thing after you brought up the pepper spray. It's like, ever since I've been here, it's like, oh, do this, just to make sure you're safe and don't get drugged somewhere. So
I don't know. Maybe I'm having a rough morning. Like, I'm disappointed in human beings this morning. Jesus H. Tap dancing Christ on a crutch. I'm sorry for that one. I didn't mean to blaspheme in front of you, but really, like, I can't walk across campus. I can't even go to a place and have a drink without fear someone is going to poison the. What is that? Like, just
Well, exactly, because
that's a stress, and it's a real thing.
Even like this year too, I kid you not, I live 2-minute walk from my friend's dorm, and even when I like try to walk back to my dorm by myself, they're like, no, we're gonna walk you there, it's okay. Like, I can't walk 2 minutes away to my own dorm.
in safe Fort Collins.
Yeah. Seriously.
It's
going off of Mackenzie, if you're finished, I also like have experienced that Fort Collins has a really, really bad catcalling problem. I can't walk a mile down the road without getting catcalled by someone in their car.
Yes.
What? Like,
I don't know if anyone else experienced
like, and I don't want to stereotype here. Is this all the construction stuff? Like, I like
well, no, I wouldn't
that seems
say
like
construction.
that seems like
it's
the classic sort of venue. Go ahead, vein for it.
I wouldn't say construction. It's more like if you walk down kind of the center road of campus that leads to like most of the dorms and stuff, there are so many random guys like revving their cars or whatever that just speed down that road all the time and just catcall girls for no reason. Like the first week I was here, when the only thing to do was kind of like walk around and like meet people, that's like all that was going down.
I'm naive. I didn't even think that was a thing. Like, isn't that a pepper sprayable offense? We should start. Hey, baby, got some fries to go with that shake? I think you earned that one. All right.
Yeah, that's also a thing in Missouri because I'm back home now.
Right.
But now that you bring it up, like there's in my neighborhood and like around me, there's a lot of younger people that are, my age, maybe like a year or two younger or in like their young mid-20s. And they all have like either sports cars or big lifted trucks with big exhausts. They're always revving. And my girlfriend talks about how like she'll just go to the gas station and people will be like, hey, you should give me your number. Like all the time.
Wow. We need sociology to save us. Oh my gosh. That's the first thing I can think of. I don't normally like to flip the script on this one, but like, do people who identify with the gender male need people to do that to them for them to realize what that's like, or would that make no difference? Like, I'm not usually that reverse type of thing, but I've seen some pretty funny things where people who identify as gender female are doing that to men, and the responses, it's like sociological experiments, social experiments, and it's like kind of mind-blowing. Okay, so openly sexually harassed, definitely unearned disadvantage. That's why car insurance is higher for men under 25. Certainly the behavior, driving, and accident rate, all sorts of things. Yeah, it's insurance is more expensive if you identify with the gender male, or if you have a red car, or if you're under the age of, right, whatever. Okay, good. What else? Unearned privileges or unearned disadvantages?
Just one last thing going on that topic.
Please do.
Men definitely have this as well. I'm not saying that they don't, but I think women are succumbed to like societal pressures. Like, you have to look this way, you have to talk this way, you have to walk like this. And I feel like that's just something that women experience far greater than men, just societal standards and like how we're supposed to look.
Yeah, and a lot more pressure and control over that type of a thing, right? And standards having been set and things like that. We'll talk about that in our gender chapter. I mean, some of the most interesting questions I ask all semester long on Top Hat would be, describe the male gender in one word. And I'm telling you what, when we have a class for 250 people, it's the diciest moment all semester. I'm always like, all right, breathe in, breathe out. and then we go. And then the second one is describe the female gender in one word. And it's just like, it's actually really interesting and great sociology, which is one of the reasons I love Top Hat, but all that for sure can get a bit dicey. And I was telling me to smile, complete strangers. My resting bitch face makes them uncomfortable. Resting bitch face. Yeah, all right, be quiet, don't take up as much space. Oh my gosh, so much of this is gender too, right? Obviously. Good. Okay, well, let's pop over here. Let me do a screen share. We'll talk a little bit
Jason,
about. Yeah, go ahead.
One other thing that I know that just because you live in Wellington and you kind of know the area too, is actually that Walmart and Costco area by Timnath is one of the highest spot in northern Colorado for women abduction.
What?
He's
First of
right
all-
there.
first
And
of
Georgetown are the two like top highest places for like sex trafficking and like kidnapping and stuff. It's crazy.
You want me to give you
guys
some?
can look it up too.
You want me to give you some advice right now? And this is
Yes.
life advice from Jason Downing at 47. Don't ever find yourself in a Walmart parking lot. No, I'm serious. These numbers are for real. Abductions, like people getting hit by the people in the, like, don't do it. Don't do it. It's a sketchy. I've not heard that about Timnath in particular, but there are statistics, and the statistics revolve around Walmart parking lots and abduction. And it's wow. Yeah, I mean, human abduction and slavery and all that is a whole nother, that's maybe it's a little too heavy for me this morning at 8:31, but I'm about to lecture on racism and dismantling prejudice, so why not, right? Wow, okay, yeah. I mean, that's such big power, historical power pieces. Abducting people, owning people. This comes from colonization. We have to understand that all of this doesn't happen in a vacuum. It has historical precedence that has been passed down, like our power structure right now. Look, let's talk about the biggest piece of white privilege that I've ever experienced in my life. That would be being president of the United States and knowing that you lost the election and being allowed to tweet conspiracy theories, hold up funding, stop COVID response. We have to understand right now, and there are people that are GOP senators that have come out and said, well, we just need to let this run its course and humor him. When do we break massive federal laws and resist massive amounts of cultural norms and values to make somebody feel okay about losing? Were we about to do that for anybody else? No. So when I was talking about this last night, Julie said, we were talking back and forth. I said in my class the other day too, and I said, I was trying to wrap my head around it. I said, the only way that you have a person in that office doing that, threatening people, not doing their job, and not be ripped out of the office kicking and screaming right now is because of white privilege. So if you want to know what white privilege is all about, look at it. Like today, the next day, how long? You've challenged court things 24 times. You've won 1 out of 24. You know that you have no chance. Lindsey Graham floated the idea of tossing out ballots in Georgia. Like, this is about race too. And I'm not making it about race. It is about white privilege and white power. And if a person of color or a woman were to attempt to do the same thing in that position of power, no, not even close. So again, not attacking on a political basis, but the kinds of conversations that people are having about how we should let this go or the validity of it, and it's all conspiracy stuff and it's all garbage, and we know that, is almost 100% coming from people of color, or people of European descent. Maybe Geraldo's in there or something like that. Geraldo. But yeah, so that's a good example of that type of a privilege as we're kind of talking about that, right? Okay, good. Let me screen share here. And again, I love, in my classes, I've always really loved, I used to start off my classes for years saying any current topics. Because if we're going to examine sociology, it really helps, I think, to look and apply it to things that are going on around us right now, whatever that might be. Not always politics by any stretch of the imagination. Okay, so do you have unearned privileges that make your life easier? And Do you have unearned privileges that make your life harder? Obviously, we're talking about an ascribed status. And if you identify with a non-dominant gender or a non-dominant race or a non-dominant age or non-dominant ability, those are things that you didn't do anything about, and they still dictated or dictate kind of where you're at, what you're doing right now in life, to a certain degree, right? They make a big impact. All right, so we didn't talk about reducing prejudice yet, did we? Let me talk about this. Here's the deal. Jane Elliott's approach is only effective with certain people. It's not a guarantee. And I love Jane, and I respect her. But a couple things here. First of all, right, we know that prejudice serves for culture some sort of like important kind of function, right, from a structural functional standpoint. But if we look down here on the slide, although it may serve some important individual or social functions, it involves invalid or irrational thinking, and I've talked about this before, and is therefore vulnerable to attack. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. However, when we're talking about dismantling prejudice, there is no one solution. And we're going to find out here in the next couple slides that it's really difficult. You've got to meet a lot of conditions for people. The situation has to be geared to the individual. When prejudice serves to justify or support discriminatory behavior, direct attempts to change it are not going to be successful, right? The ways that we approach reducing prejudice share this sort of common assumption that it's built on garbage, so it's vulnerable to attack. But how are we going to do that, right? Compassion, understanding, those are kind of vague. Education, intergroup contact, purposeful types of things. Do we let this happen naturally? Are we going to go see somebody give a lecture? Who would that be effective for, or who wouldn't it be effective for? So how would you, or have you ever dismantled prejudice? Sometimes I say WWJDD, what would Jason Downing do? It hasn't caught on quite like the other bracelets, but I'm okay with that. So what would you do? What have you done? Has anybody here been at a family reunion where racist Uncle Joe tells something and you said, nah, that's not going to fly because that's just racist? Or have any of you ever tried to dismantle prejudice or racism? And how? Like whether it's an individual thing, whether you participated in a group or a panel, whether you attended a lecture, whether you did a protest or a march. What do you think? Anybody in here actively sort of found themselves in that situation where you had to say something or do something or teach something?
I have. I've done a lot of marching and protesting. I've had a lot of hard conversations with people in my life. And I've done a lot of writing about it too. I blog a lot, so that's a big focus of what I write about.
Good. Who else in here found themselves in a situation where it was like you worked towards challenging racism or discrimination?
Yeah, I got an example. My grandfather, he's very conservative, very pro kind of white people. I wouldn't go as far as a white supremacist, but he's old school.
Right. There is a thing about old school. Like that generation, many of those folks, not white supremacists by any means, but a different set of cultural,
right,
who's right and who's wrong. Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, I think that's fairly common.
Yeah, so my cousin, he married and had a child with a woman who was born in El Salvador. So, I mean, she's very dark complexion, and he did not take to that very well in the beginning. And it took some time. I mean, things are good now, but like we had to like come together as a family and like be like, dude, you got problems and you need to like handle this. So he actually went to therapy for like months, and
right.
he got over it. And you know, she's very welcomed into our family, and they have a beautiful daughter who, it's funny because she looks just like my cousin who looks exactly like me, but she's like brown. So it's like,
excellent.
Yeah, genetics work like that. But
yeah,
it was tense and awkward for a little while, and he almost, in a way, kind of like disowned him.
Right.
But it took time, and he got over it though. So things are great now.
Wow, a couple things makes me think of. One is love matters. When you're working with people who feel that way or have those beliefs, hate is not going to do anything, and anger is not going to do anything. Like, those people, they thrive on that, and or that is easier to sort of experience for them than compassion or love. The other thing is therapy, and that's hard work. Like, good on him. That's awesome, and I think that, I don't know, that's a beautiful thing, man. That really is awesome. It's just, there's a thing about kids. There's a thing about babies, and there's a thing about kids that that person, that thing is not wrong. And they're not an adult, and they don't have all these hangups, and they're just a being. And it becomes really hard, I think, for people in those situations. Sometimes that is the best thing that can happen. I swear, because it puts people in a place where they have to deal with it, or else the rest of the family's like, see ya. I mean, we're trying to let you do this, but then there's a point that if that didn't work, human beings are done with the stress, right? So that works both ways. So good on him for not giving up or saying, F it or whatever. My dad, who's 80, says I quit. He tries to do something for 5 minutes. I quit. And then I find myself doing the same thing, and I'm like, And then Storm did something the other day, and he got frustrated, and he said, I quit. And he's like, oh, no, I just said what Grandpa said. Because he got done making fun of Grandpa. You can't just say I quit right away. Storm did it himself, and he was like, oh, all right, good. So, persuasive communication. Any communication that is intended to influence attitudes, beliefs, or behavior. Could be a speech, could be a good movie, could be a book. I mean, this course is designed to impart information sort of in a neutral fashion, so technically it's not that, but it's designed to do just that, right? This class is designed to get you critically thinking, and hopefully in a way that persuades you to do something, whatever that might be, right? I think that's the basis of sociology, is collective action and taking a look at something in society and saying, how can it be better? How can that be improved for somebody? But it's got to be heard and paid attention to. We learn to ignore persuasive communications, but people are highly susceptible still, so that's good. It's got to be correctly understood, and it's got to be understood as an attempt to reduce prejudice, right? And it's got to be a good experience. Oy vey, right? You look at this list and you're like, how's that going to work? Because it's like hand-holding. And personally, I did a lot of hand-holding with race relations for many, many years. And then I think I just got to a certain point age-wise where I'm like, we're going to do this, and then if you don't get that, I'm okay with that. Like, I just can't hand-hold. But if we're going to be effective, we've got to do that. Messages have to be retained, and they've got to be internalized by the people you're trying to persuade. So, I mean, look at all these conditions. Source of the communication, content of the message, process in which it's presented, characteristics of the audience. What's really interesting to me is some of these things that are coming out right now about people who used to be white supremacists who are now talking about their experience, like how wrong they were, what it meant, what they were doing. That's invaluable information. There's an African-American guy going around, and I didn't get to watch the whole TED Talk, but he's like attended Klan rallies, in an attempt to understand these people and stuff. And then he's speaking about it, and so we need these perspectives too of people that were in that somehow maybe got out of that. Because think about it. Jane Elliott's not going to change everybody's mind. But what about somebody who used to be a white supremacist, who used to be in an Aryan nation, who decides that they go a totally different way, and then they speak, and they can really meet on so many sociological levels with these people whom they're trying to get to think of. I mean, they might be and are some of the best allies for deprogramming, this kind of thing, or helping reduce racism. Let me look at the chat thing. What is the name of the TED? I'll have to look, but if you Google it, it'll automatically come up. Yeah, good. Okay. So, observations: people will expose themselves to messages they already believe in. I mean, obviously, right? People watch the news channel that gives them the news in the way that they want to hear it. Many of us, right? We pay better attention to viewpoints that support our pre-existing viewpoints. We remember things that reinforce what we already believe. This is kind of like human being stuff. Most likely to accept anti-prejudice communication tend to be those who are least prejudiced. And the most prejudiced are the most resistant, Well, all right, that does make sense. So how do we do that, right? Prejudiced folks often do not think of themselves as prejudiced. That's another big deal here, right? I mean, the president has no idea, technically, the level of racist that he is. That's just other people. That's what other people do, right? And we hear this all the time. I'm not prejudiced. I have black friends, or I work with somebody, a person of color, or whatever that might be. But as prejudice has become more subtle, those rationalizations become easier. That's why it's like there's something to it in the South. I can't remember if it was Dave Chappelle or if it was Chris Rock, but he's like, racism in the South is just like, morning, beep, right? You know where we stand. And then in the North or the West, it's really institutionalized. So it's dangerous when it's more subtle, right? The source is highly important in the credibility of the source. That's why a lot of times we see Tim Wise or Jane Elliott or myself. We see all sorts of people that are in dominant culture that are imparting this message. It's not because they know more than people of color. We don't at all. I mean, since breakfast, people of color have know more about race and racism than I know. We have to understand that. But the credibility of the source, the prestige, the attractiveness, the power, like having that message come from a person in dominant culture can be it can make a big impact, because we have been trained and socialized to ignore and or not listen to people or see people as color as credible, powerful, attractive, right? You know what I'm saying? So that's an important piece. Education. I know we say this in a very broad term, but intergroup education is huge. You just look at the results of cutting education for the last 70 years. It ain't making us any smarter. It's not helping us make any better decisions. And my parents were teachers in the school district for 30 and 40 some years apiece. They're always asking teachers to do more with less money. They need to stop that right now. And I'm not talking about myself. I'm independently wealthy. I teach a class at Boulder. I'm fine, right? I steal Boulder's money and talk about them behind their back. That's just because I don't like Boulder. All right. But intergroup education, you've got to bring about learning and impart information. It's not always like I'm trying to change your mind. Look, here's a shovel. You have to dig 8 feet down and 10 feet wide. Show me two people that hate each other of different races or whatever, different melanin levels in their skin, and you're going to get that done. You're going to do that thing, right? Like that's the piece of intergroup contact. It's most effective when it minimizes stress. We're just talking about people being at school together, people working a job together, people being in groups together on campus. So teachers make an important difference. And we know teachers are massively people of color and people identify with a gender that is non-dominant, missing in higher education and staffs and in entire curriculums that have been written in ways that are sort of slanted towards dominant culture. So intergroup contact again, you benefit from contact education, employment, recreational, and many other settings. People in these integrated settings showed reductions in prejudice, became less prejudiced than comparable people living in segregated settings. Segregation does not help anybody. Let's just lay it out there. It helps dominant culture, I suppose. When schools are more diverse, more interracial friendships develop. Look, you're getting multiple perspectives. Colleges, you see life like this, and then this, and then you meet somebody else, and it's like this, and like this. If you're meeting diverse people, you just function better. And I keep saying this. If you take out diverse elements of a river, just like I like to fish, you take out a couple of those things in that river, it's going to go to shit. The fishing isn't going to be good. The things on that chain aren't going to function as well. The more diverse it is, or biodiverse a river is, the same thing. We are better, more complete, and more able to interact in this world the more diverse we are and the more diverse interactions we have, because it allows us to see things from multiple perspectives, which is everything about sociology. That works, right? Studies show that heterosexuals have contact with members of the homosexual community less prejudiced than people who have not had contact. Intergroup contact is huge. But obviously, we've got to watch out about intergroup contact only being accepted in that particular situation. It has to happen across the board. Can't just be one thing, or it does become sort of that person's the exception to the rule, right? Jane Elliott said that. They said, are you an important blue-eyed person? And she said, no. Or brown-eyed, whatever. She said, but I married a brown-eyed person. I, learned how to do that. And that's kind of this thing too. So look, we want to avoid hostilities. So we focus on prejudice of majority group members. It's because it's a problem of racial discrimination by its nature. And I described this before, is mainly a majority group problem. And that is because subordinated groups do not have the comparable power to discriminate. So here we get to Jane Elliott, simulation experiences and exercises. These exercises combine aspects such as education and group contact, therapy, you name it. And again, this kind of stuff makes a immediate, ooh, oh, kind of impact. I've seen her reduce 350-pound guys to tears laying on the floor asking for her to just say she likes them. And she's like, I don't. You need to get over that. So her brutal approach, I think, is amazing. But we have to understand it's not going to be effective for everybody. All right. So a lot of conditions for us to be able to make an impact that way. All right. I'm not sure the name of the TED Talk, but if you Google African-American, attending Klan rallies, TED Talk, likely he's one of the only guys out there. And it's recent. So any questions? We're wrapping this chapter up. I think it's very important. I'm in dominant culture, and I receive lots of privilege. I identify with the dominant gender. If I shave this funky beard off and cut my hair and put a suit on, it's access all day long for Jason. I mean, I obviously am going to have to what comes out of my mouth to do that. But that being said, those are subtle changes that I can make that are real easy that other folks can't. So I guess my goal in my lifetime was just to look at why these things that I considered so arbitrary were so important to other people, and how could that possibly influence how long somebody lives or the quality of someone's life. So I encourage everybody here, and I want to thank everybody here for getting through this chapter. Bless you non-denominationally. That's right. I see you sneeze from a distance. We're doing there you go. Yeah, so any questions? Any questions? I think we all did an awesome job at this chapter as well, stratification. And does this mean that if you are a person of dominant culture and identify with a dominant gender, that everything is fantastic for you and the world is at your fingertips? No, likely not. But now we have a little better understanding of some of the more subtle dynamics and some of the bigger types of things that go into our construction of race, and then how that impacts every single person here. Any questions about the test or anything like that? I mean, oh, go ahead.
Just
Sorry.
a quick question. So I know break doesn't really start until Saturday, and I know we have our exam on Thursday, but we or some of us have to return our books before we leave on break. Or if you rented a book, you have to return it before break.
I think there's an option that you can mail it in.
Oh, you can? Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Then.
No, you're good. That would raise red flag. Well, why has red got to be the color? That would raise. I'm sorry. I'm programmed. Why?
It's early.
Yeah, I don't want to be biased against the flag color. Why would that raise? Actually, I purposely don't. If you were in my class, I would purposely mess with the class by writing certain things in red and certain things in blue throughout the course of the semester, because of our association with being graded in red and negative. I do all that when we're in the classroom. I don't get a chance to play sociological games with us in person as much as I might normally. But yeah, I would be no, I'm not going to do that anyway. You need these materials through the end of the semester. So please make sure that you figure that out, and that you keep your books, and because we still have work to do. We still have 2 more chapters and all that. Good question though, and a good thought. Any other questions? My thought is we probably won't meet Thursday, because the exam is opening up Thursday morning, and some people are going to get right on it. So any questions now that you might have, there's going to be a handful of questions about the Jane Elliott piece for sure. But you already had to watch that for the discussion and all that. So I feel like we're all good, but I want to make sure. So I'm just going to hang here for a second. Does anybody have any questions or concerns or anything like that? This is the good part about our transition. I said at the beginning of the semester, and people had concerns. What if they yank the whole thing? What if? And our what if is nothing. Business as usual. We get to go about our good little thing here in the morning. Wow, it's early, and but everybody here, familiar faces, people who've been attending, I appreciate it. Can I help you with anything? I guess. No. All right. Well, what a semester. I don't really have any other words for it. I want to be here for you as much as possible, so I want to apologize again for having to take a couple days off this class, or a few days off this class, to deal with my life. No one begrudges me any of that. That being said, I want this class to be the most awesome experience at CSU that you can possibly get. So over break, I want you to reach out to me if you're stressing about anything. We've just started the food drive. Our goal, and I think I told you that before, is 5,000 pounds across the board for all my classes. So we've got like maybe 2,000 pounds. And a lot of people haven't participated yet. Maybe combined with my other classes, maybe 2,000 pounds. I don't think that's going to be a problem. You can get other people to donate. And it does help our class. I mean, I don't care if it's your crazy uncle, wherever, whoever. I don't care if it's it doesn't matter. Just donate. And if you can't donate for those points, you could talk to me about that. I would not economically disadvantage anybody like that. Like I said before, I always offer a paper thing that we can do. Also, I found out the other day, I'm gonna wrap my head around this. There's a couple students in my class that emailed me that just don't have food. I've never gotten that email before, but I got 2 of them the other day. I said, is there anything that we can do? In the past, when I was collecting food on campus for my students, I could just be like, yeah, I'm just going to give you a bunch of food, and then we'll also donate to the food bank. So take care of each other out there. I don't think I'm going to do any in-person food stuff, but your donations, will help. So please do that, and that'll also be positive for your grade. I won't be asking any questions on Top Hat, but I did ask one this morning. So chime in. And then you've got fall break. Some people are staying on campus, correct? Or did they finally say everybody's out? I don't know. Okay. Well, if you're staying, be safe. If you're traveling, be safe. If you're traveling to a place where people don't believe in science, you can either ask that they walk out a 4th-story window to test gravity. Nope, don't do that. Don't do that. I'm telling you now, don't do that. I do that. You should not do that. But you should wear your mask. And the best way to show people the right behavior is to show people the right behaviors, to behave that way. If you want to be peace, don't go to a protest and scream and yell and spit. Be peace. If you want to show people what mask wearing looks like in a way that might be the best way to communicate it, get a mask that says, I love you no matter what, or just smile at people from behind your mask, whatever it is. I know my students are going to be right on top of everything. So you have access to me all a break. I'm going to be same place I've been for 8 months in my living room, hanging out with the boys. So please get a hold of me. The wind the other day blew down 3 of my 4 fences around my garden. And it's like 70-foot lengths of fence. I mean, it just destroyed it. So I've got a lot to do here. We curbed the baby chicken deaths, put a space heater in there and a couple lamps. And 3 nights ago, they stopped dying. Not before like 14 of them choked each other out, but that's how chickens are. So now I think it's settling out. I've gone back there before the boys get up, because Storm's like chicken guy. You saw him this morning. I get up before they get up and go out there, and I'm like, is there any tragedy afoot? No, all right. They are farm boys. but I'm going to save them a little bit of that once in a while. So anyway, be good people and do good things. I love you dearly. And please reach out over break if you have any questions about anything. Yes, you should be majoring in sociology. Peace out, everybody. Have a good one. Take care.